Hello and welcome to Stringer Things with Sinfonietta, starring Britney and Gracie Wilson. Today, we're talking with a local composer, Jack Campbell. Hello, Jack. How are you?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you both. Thanks for having me.
Beauty.
What instruments do you play?
Well, I'm a violinist, and I study at your namesake wonderful VSO School of Music. And I am also a jazz and blues guitar player. And recently, interesting fact about me, I'm very, very, very beginning stages of amateur conductor.
Wow.
Yes.
He also plays the banjo.
No, well, we must explain that. Gracie and I were at Long and McQuaid together, and we picked up banjos. I didn't play the banjo. I just managed to hammer out some chords, and so did Gracie.
You were
Wow.
shredding it on the banjo. You played amazing music.
When Gracie and I were having this moment in Long and McQuaid, at one point I looked up, and Gracie was there with the most beatified expression on her face. And I said, "What's going on, Gracie?" And she's holding this banjo as I have been playing like little rock and roll tunes on it. And she goes, "I'm just really happy right now."
I was. Anyone who knows me know I love the banjo. Like, I have a weird obsession with the banjo.
It's a very interesting instrument. Did you know it originated as a percussion instrument?
I
Did not
mean,
know.
it makes sense because of the way
It originated
looks.
as a percussion instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And and if you think of a banjo, it has that kind of drum-like bass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it had something to do with slapping the strings and then bouncing against the drum and it making percussive noises. Well, then somebody added a neck to it, and they're like, "Hey, we can play this as a guitar-like creation." Yeah, there's your banjo trivia for all you banjo nerds.
Do you play the piano?
This is an interesting question. The piano is such an important instrument, and especially for composition, it's it's got the range of the orchestra, and there's so many sounds you can take from it that I desperately wanted to be able to play the piano. I had previously absolutely no experience on the piano until 6 months ago, when I took a few piano lessons and started to figure out what the keys do. I know my way around it. I understand what it does. I understand at a beginner level how to utilize its potential. But can I play it? Absolutely not. I think it's an incredible instrument. I mean, I watch piano players and I'm like, oh my God, I can hardly read the treble clef. How do you read both the treble and the bass clef?
So when you compose, do you do it on the piano or?
My composition process is kind of unusual and weird. I started composing because I began to hear finished pieces of music in my head, and I realized my head was creating them. And I was just like, oh, that's neat. And then once in conversation, I kind of casually brought this up with my mother, and she let me know that that doesn't happen to everyone. I thought it did. So I was like, oh, that's cool. Might as well take some composition lessons and have some fun with it. So I began to study composition, and that evolved, and I began to become more and more interested in it. My perspective on classical music evolves through the experience. I sank deeper into its intricacies and the opportunities it presents, and also just the sound, the glory of basking in that sound. And I realized this is where I want to center my passion and intensity, and I think it's a great outlet for my personality. But in my opinion, the pieces I was writing sucked. And I really must tell you that I cannot give enough thanks to my composition mentor, the absolutely wonderful Canadian composer, Rodney Sharman. He used to be composer in residence at the VSO, and he introduced me to things about music that I had no idea, and introduced me to worlds of music I hadn't explored. And as much as I'm still very much a student, and by no means an evolved professional, I really feel that under his guidance, my ability to harness what I hear has evolved to levels I previously thought unobtainable. And now my process includes taking sounds and melodies and harmonies I hear in my head, figuring out a method of expression, creating a form or a guideline by which to write the piece by. Usually that is inspired by some other form of art, such as architecture or literature or painting. And then I set on my creative process, where I just do a draft where I write down by hand everything I hear in my head, all the parts, as they come bar by bar. Then I do a revision where I sometimes add things, sometimes take my pen, cross things off the score. Then I do another write out, bar by bar, part by part. And then I plug it into online transcription software. From then it takes about 10 edits to get all the parts right and everything succinct and harmonized correctly. And then usually I have a piece.
So why did you choose violin as a major in university and not composition?
That is a question that I ask myself daily. I think it can be broken down into 3 parts. The first being, it's where my soul was leading me. I knew that that is the direction that at this stage of my life, these next 4 years, that I wanted to head in. And I could feel that pull, that kind of magnetic, you guys know what I'm talking about, but that magnetic attachment that you feel between yourself and your violin, where you can feel it merging with your physicality. The second aspect of that is I simply adore the violin. However, my sound and my ability isn't nearly where I want it to be. And I know that through going through years and hopefully more degrees of violin performance, I will be able to become closer and closer to that ultimate goal that I want to achieve. Now, that said, my composition ability is nowhere near what I want it to be either. However, I felt the urge to achieve that next level of success was stronger with the violin. The third is simply a practical reason, and it's at a university. It's really, really easy to get a degree in an instrument and then get a second degree in composition. It is virtually impossible to get a degree in composition and then a second degree in an instrument.
Why is that?
I think it's because it's an entirely different skill set, and sometimes it's even an entirely different faculty. In a performance degree, you do not need to take composition. You do not need to be a composer. In the composition degree, you absolutely need to be a performer, and you absolutely need to be adept on an instrument, preferably a few. Therefore, it made more sense to become really much more adept than I already am at an instrument, and then later, if I feel I would like to pursue composition. The other thing, and this is kind of juvenile, since a very young age, my hero has been Leonard Bernstein, and I was reading his biography, well, his autobiography actually, and it said in there that his first degree was in the performance of the piano. So I was like, oh, well, I've always wanted to be like Lenny, so if that's what Lenny did, that's what I'm going to do. Now, I'm not 1/100th of what Lenny is, and I never will be, but it seemed like do as Bernstein was a good way to go. It's kind of silly, but you know.
How long do you spend composing a single piece? How do you decide when it's done?
This is a very interesting question. I'm going to answer it backwards. There are 2 ways that either half of your question can be approached. In terms of when I know it's done, the first way is when the sounds that I hear evolving in my head have ceased to occur. The other is when the form I've created is over. So how long I spend, there are 2 factors to that. One is how quickly things are coming to me. I've actually written entire first drafts of pieces in one night. The other is sometimes painstaking work over several months. For example, the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra performed at the 2019 Gene Coulthard readings the 4th movement of my first symphony, which was a tremendous honor. I cannot thank the VSO enough. I was thrilled. They did such an incredible job, as they always do. And thank you to Andrew Crust for doing such amazing work with my piece, and I'm just entirely grateful. Anyways, that piece I wrote, that movement of that symphony I wrote between March of 2019 and July of 2019. It was extensive. The first movement of that piece I wrote in 2 weeks in April 2020. The first movement is substantially more complex and longer. It's really a matter of where my mindset is at. I also wrote a flute piece, actually, which when Sonic Boom 2020 is rescheduled will be performed by Mark Takeshi McGregor at the Young Composers Masterclass. I'm very excited about that because, as you know, Mark's a Canadian flute legend. But that piece, I challenged myself to write 1 or 2 measures a day over the course of a month. Now, that was a very interesting exercise because, as you know, every day you're in a different mindset. Every time you pick up your fiddle, it sounds different. So that's kind of cool, and I think that's piece has some interesting character changes because of that. I've also written, extensively in one night. It really does vary depending on my mindset, also my physical state, my mental state, and as much as it's a silly thing that everyone deals with, time.
So when you say you hear the music in your head, do you have perfect pitch?
Yes, I do have perfect pitch. However, as anyone with perfect pitch will tell you, perfect pitch is in no way associated with quality of musicianship. It's just an innate skill. And it doesn't really, personally, I don't mean to put words in the mouths of people with perfect pitch, but personally, it doesn't really provide me with much more than excellent party tricks. I think it has helped me a lot in that the pieces I hear in my head, I'm able to instinctually know what notes I am hearing in what instruments. Like I'll play it in my head and I'll be like, okay, well that's an F major chord in the French horns, and then we've got this, B flat pattern in the viola or whatever. However, I know that for anyone who hears music in their head, even without perfect pitch, they can always figure out what it is they're performing, whether or not they just take the pattern and put it in whatever key they choose, or they play it on the piano. It's a cool thing, but I don't really think it's contributed to what I create or how I create it.
Do you like a lot of your pieces, or do you just hate them all when you hear them?
I have written 10 opuses as we speak, which is June 6th, 2020. 2 of those pieces I wholeheartedly despise, and I have a desire to shred the scores, even though I know that's immature. 5 of those pieces I'm extremely fond of and proud of, and 2 I think are kind of
What do you think about the Curse of the Ninth? Are you familiar with this?
The Curse of the Ninth?
Yeah.
I am familiar with this.
Okay, so for those of you who do not know, a whole bunch of composers died after or while composing their Ninth Symphony, including Beethoven. So, what do you think, Jack?
This is a very interesting topic. As you know, classical music is filled with all sorts of superstitions, whether it is back in the early stages of music, the Vatican banning the use of the tritone, and since Wagner's time, the tritone has perhaps become the most crucial interval in music. Whether or not it's various artists, particularly virtuoso violinists, such as Tarantini or Paganini, being associated with satanic influence, there is this trend toward superstition. Fun fact, Arnold Schoenberg had a paralyzing phobia of the number 13. Now, the Curse of the Ninth is an interesting example because, as you know, it is actually rooted in fact. So many composers did die after writing their Ninth Symphony. So many composers started their 10th and didn't live to finish it. So I think that's very interesting. However, I think it can be explained through logic and not through a superstition, because there are a plethora of amazing composers, Mozart, Shostakovich, who composed well beyond 9. Mozart going to 41, Shostakovich going to 15. There are also amazing composers who just got to 3. Stravinsky, Bernstein. So what I think is, I think it's a testament to the unbelievable difficulty of composing a symphony of that value to be a great symphony. And I can't put enough pressure on that value, because some composers found it such a daunting task that, even though in the case of Stravinsky they lived well into their 70s, that they were only able to create 3. Other composers, such as Mozart, who were unbelievably prolific, managed to create 41 in a very, very short lifespan, which is just unbelievable. I mean, it's incomprehensible. So what I believe it is that so many composers died after creating their 9th symphony is that writing a symphony is so in-depth and excruciatingly intense that by the time you've composed 9 symphonies, in terms of the way the human body operates, it's kind of logical that you'd be on your deathbed.
But wouldn't it be cooler if there was a curse?
Yeah, it would. And it's interesting when you think about how Mahler tried to cheat death by writing that that symphony with the lead that he actually didn't call a symphony, even though that's basically what it is. That's kind of neat.
I think we were supposed to be in a chamber group together, us three.
We were, yeah.
And then I bailed out on you guys. I
Oh,
left
you
you
were
guys.
supposed to be in that, Brittany. It ended up just being Gracie and I.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's what
okay.
me.
I'd always wondered who bailed.
Yeah, no.
And it was supposed to be someone else too, but they left. They
Oh, I
left
bet
that
we were
year.
supposed to play. I bet we were supposed to play the Vivaldi Concerto for 4 violins.
Yes. I eventually managed to play that one.
Yeah.
I've played that too.
Without
What part did-
me.
You're technically in it.
Right, so important.
You guys need to watch Morton Feldman in Gesprek.
What? How do you spell
Morton
that?
Feldman is probably the most important composer of the latter half of the 20th century, and he did these interviews in the Netherlands where he talks with various composers for 2 hours about things, and they're amazing. I love them. I listen to them a few times a week.
Wait, how do you spell it? Morton what?
Morton Feldman. He wrote a string quartet that's 6 hours long.
Wow, imagine
Yeah.
playing that. Mm.
Apparently, it's no longer than 6 hours because the viola player said they couldn't hold up their viola longer.
Viola players.
The first movement of my first symphony starts with
Oh
a
my
viola
God.
melody.
That's what I want to do. I want to have as many viola solos as possible.
Why?
Because I love viola.
It starts with an atonal viola melody doing ponticello.
Oh my God.
I don't
That's
know
your-
what that means.
You don't know what ponticello is?
No!
I'll play you ponticello. 1 second. Ponticello is this. So we play normally like this, right?
Yeah.
Ponticello is this.
Oh.
Yeah. When you go.
Okay.
When you play right on the bridge.
Right.
Gracie, Brittany, thank you so much for having me on. It's been so awesome to talk to you guys. I hope we stay in touch. What you're doing is awesome. Thanks so much.
And a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Stringer Things with Sinfonietta, hosted by Britney Doe and Gracie Wilson. Remember to tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. for a brand new episode. Until then, stay safe and happy practicing.